quickly. I know you have some questions about that, and then Nancy will talk a little bit more about some of the future planning. But as we present a budget to the board next week at our board meeting, so we don't have a final budget approved as yet, so it's still a proposed budget at this point in time. But as we've studied kind of the higher education landscape, almost anything you read, and I'm on the American Council on Education board, and we do weekly board calls with that group to hear what's going on. Everybody's predicting, for the most part, sort of on average 10 to 20% declines in enrollment in the fall. Retention, they're estimating, is going to be quite a bit lower. None of us know for sure how that's going to impact each of our individual institutions. The higher ranked you are, the more unique you are, the less impacted you will probably be. But as we planned our budget for the coming year, we kind of estimated about a 10% decline in enrollment, both with new students and returning students, and then the subsequent other impacts that has on housing and meal plans and all of that. And I think we had shared earlier, we were kind of working on a budget reduction of between $65 and $80 million for next year based on that scenario. And so what we've kind of ended up with is about the mid-range of that, which is kind of a not the best case scenario, but it is certainly not the worst case scenario. The worst case scenario would assume we would not be back on campus in the fall. This scenario assumes we'll be back on campus in some form or fashion in the fall. If that doesn't happen, if things turn again and we aren't able to, we would have to make an adjustment to the budget again. And so we've really, everybody's worked hard to get to this point to have the proposed budget that we're submitting to the board that kind of gets us to that $73 million. And it really is a combination of avoiding certain costs. So the more of costs we can avoid that we don't have to engage, the better off we are. Some cost reductions, and then some reallocations of funds that help us from having to have other cost reductions. So basically what we've ended up with, every unit on campus is impacted by this. All of our units, whether they're academic or student life or athletics or HR or finance or advancement and development, everybody is a part of this. Everybody has contributed to that $73 million. To provide a little bit of context, we've tried really hard to protect the academy and to do everything we can to ensure we continue to make progress, even if maybe it's a little slower than we had anticipated, on Illuminate and on supporting the academic mission of the institution, and frankly, to support our students. So if you look at the realignments that we're making to the budget, if you look at the total budget of the academy, so all of the schools together, their faculty, staff, costs, operating expenses, it will be about a 4.2% reduction in that set of budgets overall. Student life is about a 5.7% reduction. We, again, trying to protect to some extent what the student-facing activities. Athletics is about 8.8%. And if you look at the administrative support, so all the administrative functions, HR, finance, advancement, development, marketing, and so on, that's about 19.7% reduction in their budgets. So everybody's having impact and is a part of this contribution. And what I would say is what we're really trying to do is protect the core mission and the core values of the university and what we do, so that we can continue to make progress academically, even as we have to make some of these reductions. We tried to pick prudent tools that we thought would have the biggest impact, but also not hurt some of our core mission and values. And trying to minimize the risk of future cuts by trying to be prudent and proactive now, as opposed to reacting later on in the process. And it does leave us some flexibility. We don't know what fall enrollment's going to look like. You know, we're monitoring. We don't know what January is going to look like. The more we hear about this, the more we hear it's going to probably be 18 months or longer before we get through this. So there could continue to be impacts into the spring and even into next fall, depending on the availability of vaccines and other sorts of things. So it does leave us flexibility if we need to look again back at the budget. And then it allows us to reinvest strategically if things end up looking better than we anticipated that they would. But we're trying to take the long view on this and not overreact, but also not underreact, so we can really protect the core of the university and ensure we're continuing to support our students and our faculty as we go through this and prepare to ensure that the well-being of the institution for the long run. So I think I will stop there, let Nancy make a few opening comments, and then we are happy to answer any questions that you have.
Great. Thank you so much. Let me just add my gratitude to those that President Livingstone has already expressed. I know that this has been a very challenging spring, and I am so grateful for the changes that you have made in order to continue to deliver a great education to Baylor students under trying conditions. So thank you so much. And also especially perhaps for our academic professionals in the library who provided so much of the professional development and so much of the support that enabled us to have what I think has actually been a really terrific spring. So, so thank you. I also want to say thank you for your partnership as we walked through these changes together over the spring and made these changes. You have been terrific partners. You know, going to pass fail, for example, that was controversial. But y'all were really terrific in terms of helping to facilitate that conversation and to help us come to a solution that I think was well reasoned. I'll talk a little, let me say a little bit about the approach to fall planning. First of all, let me say, as President Livingstone has already said, I think it's important for us to recognize that what we're planning for is not just the fall. The current challenges that we're facing could well last longer than just the fall. And a lot of people are predicting, as President Livingstone said, 18 months or perhaps even longer. We just don't know. But what we want to do in the fall is to put into place a strong educational program that has Baylor's signature, that has Baylor's value, but that can also be sustained in an era where we're going to have to be able to operate differently. Generally speaking, the strategy is for the fall is to begin to reduce density of people across campus. We know that the more that we can put space between people, you know, the 6-foot social distancing, the more that we can enable ourselves as a campus to operate that way, the more we're putting in place a sustainable operation that can deliver a high quality education to our students. In order to reduce density, and when I say reduce density, I mean across campus, not just in classrooms, but don't forget hallways, don't forget restrooms. I mean, across campus, we have to think about how we can operate differently. We will be putting in place, for example, strategic use of online teaching, as well as better use of space in order to try to deliver our courses in the fall. The first step that we've taken, as I think many of you already know, is for faculty who are at higher risk in this pandemic to self-identify, so that we can first figure out how to provide them with opportunities to teach online in the fall. And then from there, we will be looking at high enrollment classes that could perhaps be taught online, because the more that some of those high enrollment classes can be taught online, it allows us to open up space, if you will, in our high capacity classrooms, so that some of our other classes we can put into these large classrooms, smaller number of students and larger classroom spaces. We also want to look at putting courses that have multiple sections, having at least one section that's offered online. And this is as much to accommodate students as anything else. I mean, it's to reduce density, but also because we have students with special needs, oftentimes who may not be able to return to campus, either because their immune system is depressed, or perhaps they're international students who physically can't get here. We'll need to make some accommodations for students, and having some of these courses with multiple sections, having an online option is a way of achieving that. And then with our face-to-face classes, we'll be looking again at putting smaller classes in larger spaces. We'll need to be able to use our space more completely by teaching not only in the middle of the day, but also late afternoon, evening, perhaps some on Saturdays. A lot of faculty are already thinking very creatively about how to do this. I love that. I know Brian's going to be teaching a lot of his classes in a hybrid model where he meets face-to-face with the students one day a week, and then another group on a Wednesday, and then another group on a Friday. He still has his entire class, but they alternate being face-to-face. That's one model. I know the Ed School has another model I just learned about this morning, where they're thinking in terms of putting a lot of their lectures on tape, and then their class meetings are all very discussion based and in smaller groups. And so it's an opportunity to think very differently in terms of how you're delivering and delivering the curriculum. And I know that there's a lot of creative minds out there that are coming up with great ideas. We are moving ahead rapidly to get technology in all of the classrooms. We'll need to be able to design classrooms so that if students need to quarantine, they still have a way of being a part of the class. And so having lecture capture, for example, in all of the classrooms is one of the things that we're putting in place. And for a smaller number of classrooms, we'll have very high level technology capabilities that will enable some different ways of providing innovative approaches to connecting with our students. So that's kind of where we are in terms of planning right now. We have a lot of work left to do. And I want very much to keep in contact with you all. This is the great ideas for how we're going to do this will oftentimes come from the people who are actually doing the work. And so I want to hear your great ideas and learn how we can, again, continue to deliver that Baylor education under conditions that none of us have lived through before. So thank you for the opportunity to be here today, and I think we'll just listen to your questions, your concerns, and so I'll hand it back off to you, Brian.
Thank you both. Thanks very much. So the way we'll proceed, questions are primarily going to come from members of the Senate. If you have a question, just type in the chat. Coretta just typed something in the chat, and I'll recognize you in order. There is also, for everyone else watching, there is a Q&A feature that if you're an attendee that you can interact with. You can type a question there and they can be upvoted and downvoted. I don't know if they can be downvoted. They can be upvoted. I'll try to fit some of those in, but primarily the questions are going to be coming from members of the Senate. So first off, Holly Collins, you have a question. Go ahead.
I do. So thank you, President Livingstone and Provost Brickhouse, for being here. I have a handful of questions from constituents. I will, as Brian asked, pose them one at a time so everybody gets a turn. The first one has to do with just classroom safety in general. So is there a plan for testing of students, faculty, and staff before they return to campus or within the first 2 weeks before classes start? Will there be face mask requirements? And how is it anticipated that the classrooms themselves will be disinfected, potentially between classes even?
Let me provide kind of a high level kind of structure, how we're looking at these things. And Nancy, you can kind of talk about those more specifically. We have set up a task force called Project 824. 824 is the day school's supposed to start in the fall on August 24th. And that task force is composed of people from all areas of campus, whether that's out of the provost office, the facilities folks, the student life folks, and on and on. So it's a task force, and they're right now in the process of looking at identifying as many issues as we can, like you mentioned, Holly, the same kinds of things you're asking about, and building out all of the things we're gonna have to look at and consider, look at how we might have to think about those, whose task is it gonna be to complete some of these things. And so we're in the process of developing that kind of map of all of these kinds of issues we might have to consider for fall. We have not made final decisions on almost any of those because things change so much, but we'll try to address as many of your questions as you can specifically about these things, but know that that's in process. Some of the things you asked us about today might actually cause us to add some things to that list and make sure that they're listed as priorities. And we're certainly paying attention to what other universities are doing and trying to learn from them too, as we build out all the different things we need to consider for the fall. But Nancy, you can speak maybe. Nancy and Chris Holmes, our general counsel, are co-chairing that task force. So Nancy's more involved on some of the details than I am and some of the things they're looking at.
Yeah, first of all, let me say, you know, the classroom safety is incredibly important because, you know, we need to, I mean, we know that our faculty are actually more susceptible to this than our students are. And we also need faculty to be comfortable in these classrooms and to be, you know, engaged in their classrooms. And so anyway, anything that we can do to assure your safety is something we're paying a lot of attention to. We certainly, while we don't have a plan yet for the testing, that is very high on our priority list to get both the testing as well as the contact tracing in place for the fall. Testing is ramping up. So we do hope to have that capacity in the fall. We're working with our own public health faculty and graduate students, as well as with the community health department to get the contact tracing in place. So that if we did have a case on campus, we would have a way of knowing who all that person had contact with. We have a lot of masks right now, I will tell you that, and they're high quality N95 masks. I don't know if it's enough yet, but that's another thing that we're working on is trying to get enough. I think masks are likely to be something that will be important for the fall. There was one other thing that you mentioned in there. What was it? There's the testing and the masks.
Disinfecting the classroom between classes.
That is high on the list of facilities to do very intensive cleaning. What we'll need to do is really communicate to you all what that cleaning looks like. But that is also very much on our list of things to, again, we need faculty to feel both comfortable and to be well for us to create a sustainable educational enterprise. And so anything that we can do to mitigate risks for you all is something that we're taking very seriously. And if there are things that we aren't thinking about, let us know. I'll tell you one thing that we've talked about, and I'd like to know if you think this would be helpful, is teaching behind plexiglass. I don't know what your thoughts are about that. So many faculty move around so much, I don't know if it's going to do that much good. But I'll just throw that out as another thing that you might want to, you know, particularly talk to your chair about, if that would be something that would make you feel more comfortable.
One of the things I'll just add, it's a little bit tangential to Holly's question, but it ties to this idea of testing and contact tracing, is we're also working on how we might isolate students if they test positive and need to be isolated or need to be quarantined if they had close contact with somebody that has tested positive. It was one of our challenges this spring. We really didn't have capacity on campus to isolate students if we had them back. And so that is also one of the issues that the task force is looking at, is how might we isolate students as quickly as possible, and what would be the mechanism for doing that, either on or off campus. So that is also part of the plan.
And we are also paying attention to CDC guidelines.
Okay, thank you. Coretta, you have a question?
Good afternoon, both of you. Thank you for taking our questions. I actually have a related question about, well, regarding Holly's question. One of my colleagues wanted to know what protective measures were in place for the cleaning staff. So kind of who's going to be watching them and taking care of them.
Mm-hmm.
And then just to follow up, you know, should they get sick, will they have paid sick leave if they need to quarantine and get better and see a doctor?
Okay. So our cleaning staff, all the maintenance staff, food service staff on campus are employees of Aramark. They're not Baylor employees, and we contract with Aramark. So I'll answer to the best I can. And I don't know, Nancy, if you have anything to add. I do know that they put in some really strict protocols with their staff related to masks and gloves and other things, even before we kind of left campus, you know, fully in the spring, in the cafeterias, which, you know, we're using very minimally now, face masks and everything. So I know they have a lot of really strict cleaning protocols. Brett Dalton, our chief operating officer, or our chief business officers, work very closely with them. I don't, Coretta, know the answer to your question about their benefits packages and their sick leave. I mean, I know they have obviously a benefits package and sick leave. I don't know exactly how it works in relationship to these kinds of issues, but we can certainly get you some more information on that. But we are working very closely with Aramark, both for the benefit of our folks, to make sure we're doing everything we can to keep the campus clean and safe, but trying to make sure their people are protected as well in the process.
Thanks. All right, Dorothy, you're up next.
Yeah. Hi, thanks for answering our questions. And mine is coming from a colleague, and others expressed something similar. But so, I mean, you probably know faculty, when they look at cost cuts, they mainly see what affects them, which of course is environment and stuff, but they don't see all the other cost cuts that are, you know, being undertaken. So would you mind, you know, telling us about some of the say, educational related cost cutting measures that, you know, we can expect to see in the coming year or so, especially ones related, say, to institutional support and other areas that have experienced a high increase in expenses in the last 15 years. Yeah, that was the question.
Mm-hmm. So, so let me talk. So on that, just in the academy, the primary impact in the academy was related to the deferral right now of the pay increase, the reduction in retirement contribution, which we, based on the feedback you all provided, have agreed to review in 2 years as we see kind of how this plays out, and then to not filling empty faculty positions. So that was really if you look at all the numbers, that's primarily the impact on the academy. We did not make any reductions in operating budgets in the academy. So if you look in the other areas, student life, athletics, and others, not filling open positions was clearly a big piece of that. The same things with salaries, with the pay increase, and with the retirement contributions. That affected everybody across the board across the university. And then really looking at operating budgets and making significant reductions in those operating budgets. Some of the other things that, looking at my notes here, some of the other things that we've looked at, and these are kind of university level kinds of issues. We are going to get money from the CARES Act. There's certainly some of that goes directly to students, but we'll get a little over $5 million out of the kind of the first stimulus package that goes straight to the university to help us cover our costs. And we're putting that against that $73 million. We're working on We'd already planned to refinance some debt the university has. And if we can get that refinanced, Dorothy, you're a business school person. So right now the markets are really tight and nobody's refinancing much of anything. But if we can, and we think we will be able to in the coming months, that will save us about $9 million a year. So that money's going towards that 73 million. University-wide, our procurement area is renegotiating large contracts that the university has, whether that's with Aramark or other contracts that we have, and that will contribute millions of dollars, we think several $million to the bottom line. You mentioned athletics specifically. Athletics has looked at their operating budget like everyone else and really looked at how they can cut expenses out of their budget. Certainly what happens with athletics will be very dependent on what we can and can't do with regard to playing sports beginning in the fall. And so their budget will certainly be impacted significantly depending on the direction that that goes. So there's a lot of unknowns, probably almost as many or more unknowns for them as there are for others. But again, operating expenses there, open staff positions, as well as the retirement impact, and then the salary, deferring the raise pool right now. So I'm trying to think if there's
Deferring construction.
Oh yeah. So we have deferred construction with the exception of projects that are either fully funded by donor money that we have commitments to. Tidwell will continue because we already had donor money in the bank for that and are moving forward with that. So yes, we're deferring construction projects as well until the point at which we feel comfortable moving forward with those, or donor money comes in to fully fund those.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, up next, Karen LeCompte.
Yes, first of all, thank you, President Livingstone and Provost Brickhouse, for being here with us today and taking your valuable time to answer our questions. We can only imagine the level of stress and work that you both are under. And so I wanted to begin my question by thanking you for that incredible amount of work that you're doing. My question has to do with proposed budget cuts to Baylor's online program managers like 2U and KeyPath and others, with a proposal we want to still strive for R1. I'm sure we still want R1, but these programs are vital to our faculty, and proposed change going from 75-25 agreed upon split to a 60-40 split is like not helping us to reach our scale in terms of promoting doctoral students and graduating them through our exclusive online programs, as well as our Master of Teaching program, which is a smaller program, but nevertheless budget cuts to those kinds of programs that faculty use to reach R1 status. Can you talk to me about your thoughts about those budget cuts?
So I'll be glad to speak to that. So first of all, there aren't any budget cuts. What happened actually when I arrived at Baylor was I realized that we had a lot of OPMs on campus, and that every program had a different arrangement. And each arrangement was, it varied from actually the 60-40 split to a number of other kinds of arrangements, 75-25. And that's the split. The split that you're referring to there is the split between the college and the provost's office. And so what I have done is worked with the deans to come up with a single model for how the revenue share would work. There's a little bit more coming to the provost's office. And the reason for that is twofold. One is because we actually want to get rid of the OPMs. They're getting half the revenue from these graduate programs. So what we really need to do is stand up the central support so that Baylor can provide its own graduate and professional programs and keep all of the revenue rather than giving half of it away. And so some of that will be used for that. And then the rest of it will also be used for supporting faculty, including supporting faculty in those programs that are growing. I would be absolutely crazy not to support a strong online program that is attempting to really scale its impact on Baylor. And I am very, very committed to that because, as you've already noticed, it is bringing in resources to the university that can help us pay for our Research One aspirations and the research that we need to be doing in order to reach those goals. So I am here to support all of our programs, whether they be on ground or online. And I'm fully committed to doing that.
The only thing I would add, it just really reinforces Nancy's last point. Those programs have been unbelievably successful and been wonderful additions to our portfolio. They are going to be critical to us achieving the goals of Illuminate. So we absolutely want to support them and ensure they're successful. And frankly, they're actually helping us manage through this crisis in ways that will be a lot less painful than if we did not have those programs on our campus, because they really have helped enhance the bottom line for the university. So they're critical to us, Karen, and we absolutely are committed to them continuing to be successful and frankly looking for new opportunities in some of those spaces to add new programs.
Well, thank you both of you for those responses. And just one last follow-up question. I realize they're not budget cuts, so to speak, and I understand your answer, but would you be willing to entertain, other options and shared, just conversations about how those move along?
Well, I'm working very closely with the deans on that right now. And so absolutely, always open to those conversations.
Thank you so much.
Thanks. Denise, you have a question?
I do. Thank you both for being here with us today. As you know, I am one of the chief marshals for graduation. And this year, I also happen to be on the committee that's planning convocation. And at our last meeting for the convocation committee, there was discussion from the student life representative about how we can effectively fit 3,000 students into the Farrell Center socially distanced. And so now I'm thinking we can probably get 3,000 in the seats socially distanced, but there's no way we can get the number of graduates in the Farrell Center socially distanced. So what is your realistic thinking about how we're going to have graduation in August?
Well, I wish I knew the answer to that question, Denise.
I'm sure you do.
I was on a call this morning with some of our high school superintendents in town, and they're just totally stressed about May, of course. And of course, we made the decision a long time ago not to do May, but we don't know for sure about August. I mean, when we made the decision to cancel May, we kind of made it clear we'd let them walk in August. But then, of course, at that point in time, we were kind of optimistic that this would sort of have gone away by August. And now it's pretty clear that's not going to be the case. So we're looking at options for August and different ways to do it, whether you do smaller ceremonies by school or division somehow, or find other alternative ways to do it. And that really is kind of part of this overall planning as we go to the fall, because that graduation happens just really almost, a week or two before the fall semester starts. So, if you have any brilliant ideas, Denise, we're open to those creative suggestions. We certainly want to be able to do something in August for our graduates, because it will be close enough to the start of school that if we're going to have students back on campus for the start of school, we'd like to be able to do something for our graduates in August. But I don't know the particulars of that yet, but we're certainly looking at a variety of ways to think about doing that. And I appreciate the work that's being done on convocation as well. So we don't have a lot of large spaces for these kinds of things to take place, especially in the heat of the summer, which poses some challenges for us.
Right. Nobody wants to be standing outside in August
No.
for a ceremony. So thank you.
Thanks. All right, Derek Dodson.
Thank you all for being with us. So I want to go back to the question about sort of classrooms and some of my colleagues, especially those who are on the front lines doing scheduling for the fall and thinking about classes and capping classes. Do you know when there might be some more specific guidance or direction about what the expectations are about classroom sizes? For example, in religion, our introductory classes, our average class is 60 students. So that's what we've done in the past. The 60 students automatically mean an online class. Do you know when we'll start getting some of that information?
So I would expect in the next 2 to 3 weeks, we'll have better answers to those kinds of specific questions. I will say that a 60-person class is not big enough for us to put that in the category of a high volume course. But what we have to do first, this is a very layered approach. And the very first thing is we've got to figure out what we can take online. We're also balancing, and I think you can appreciate this, we do not want our freshmen to have all online courses. So we're trying to balance what it is we're offering online so that we are able to open up some classroom space so that we can accommodate those 60-person classes. And again, we don't have answers today, but again, I would say by Memorial Day,
Okay.
we should know.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks. Kurt Nichols, you're up next.
Yeah, hi, thank you, Brian. And thank you for our collective leadership in the Senate and our guests for being here today. It's a trying time, and I'm glad that everybody could come out and answer questions and stuff for us. I have two really quick questions. I think the first is a yes, no, so I'll just pop that in there with a second short question. The first yes, no is the when you talk about renegotiating contracts, is it possible that also includes medical benefit contracts? Is that something that's on the table? And second, is it possible, I've noticed that when we've talked about self-identifying folks, people have used the word high risk. Is it also possible that we think about incorporating the idea of hardship within that and figuring out maybe what that means? I know I'm a single dad with primary custody of my son. There's got to be other people out there like me, other folks in my constituents are taking care of sick children. So I wonder if it's probably a more difficult category, but have we given any thought, and can we give some thought to adding hardship perhaps to some of these considerations? Thank you.
I'll take the first question, Nancy. You can take the second one. You know, the medical, we're on a different cycle with medical stuff because it cycles at the beginning, on a calendar year basis and not on an academic year basis. But we actually renegotiate that every year and revisit the benefits and trying to keep our costs as low as possible. So that is absolutely something that every year our HR folks are working with our insurance folks to try to provide the best coverage we can for the least cost possible. So absolutely, that's something we look at. And it's something we do on an annual basis, but it will certainly be something we look at this year.
And Kurt, the answer to your question is yes, we have thought about that. We haven't put really specific guidelines there yet. I think that what I hope will happen is there will be some individuals that really, just cannot have, face-to-face contact in the fall. And obviously we're going to give them the highest priority. But I know that there will be a lot of others that fall into the category that you are describing. And I think that it's going to be really reliant. We're really relying on our great chairs to understand both the curricular needs as well as the faculty needs and try to figure out ways to make that a win-win kind of scenario where that faculty member is perhaps is willing to teach one of the courses that we really need online. Those faculty that are both skilled at teaching online and have a special desire to teach online will be accommodated first. So yes, I think chairs will take hardship under consideration, and I'm hoping that won't become a problem. I'm hoping it will be handled at the ground level, because the last thing I want to do is to be in the middle of it.
Sure, great. And I appreciate that. And I would just close by saying, yeah, it's great to have a signal from the administration, at least the word in there somewhere. But I think speaking from experience, my chair is taking care of that. So if that's the plan, that's great.
Great.
Okay, thanks. I'm going to ask a question from the Q&A. I know those of you who aren't on the Senate there's some questions that are popping up in the Q&A here. I'm going to try to fit a few of these in. The primary mechanism, though, was for faculty to reach out to members of the Senate. I didn't realize the Q&A feature was here until earlier this week. So we're going to try to use it, but really those of us that are on the Senate have been collecting questions from the faculty for the last week or so. Okay, so the first question on the Q&A is, are you contemplating upper caps on enrollment in online sections? How large of a section should a particular faculty member be responsible for?
I don't believe we have talked about upper caps. There's a variety of different ways of handling that. We do know that online courses do not necessarily mean larger courses. A lot of the times you do need special help in large enrollment classes in terms of managing student projects and communicating with students. Let me put that on my to-do list. If you don't mind. I don't know what has been typical here in terms of the size of online courses, but I hear the concern.
Yeah, okay, thanks. My question, I'm going to ask a question that I received. So I've been getting a lot of emails, like I'm sure everyone on the Senate, with questions. To some degree, I'm trying to prioritize the ones that I've received. So I hope to be able to get to all of the questions that have been emailed to me. So this question comes from a concerned faculty member. It is a clinical faculty member. I'll read part of the email. It says a full-time workload is 90 to 105%. To assist with budget concerns, a reduction in course percent credit. So for example, a 3-hour course that used to be 25% is now being counted in this faculty member's unit as 22%. And they're also increasing the number of students for each section. So this faculty member has told me repeatedly how pleased they are to be at Baylor. They love the job, but they're worried if these changes in workload are permanent. So this person may be going from a normal 3 to 4 sections a semester to 6 to 9. Now, some of these sections, I should point out, are not 3-hour sections. They might be 1-hour sections. But the concern, I'm hearing a lot of support for we got to do what we got to do to get through next year. There's concern, though, that some of these changes may be extended beyond next year.
So I don't feel like I have enough information to really know the details of what this particular faculty member is facing. But I mean, generally speaking, faculty member working a full-time load is basically what we're going for. We're not going for more than a full-time load. I think that's not a sustainable model. And I'll just preface it by saying that my goal for the fall is to create something that is sustainable, something that can be continued, for a longer period than just a semester.
Right. So in this instance, it sounds like the definition of what percent a course or a 3-hour course, a 2-hour course, a 1-hour course, and what percent of the workload that would count for is changing.
This is the first time I've heard of that.
Okay.
There is no university workload policy. It makes me think we might ought to have one.
Right.
But a course should be the same actually across all parts of the university. It shouldn't count differently in one department than it does in another department, unless special characteristics of that course that I'm not understanding.
Okay, I may follow up with you on that later.
Okay.
Nancy.
Thank you.
Okay, Holly.
So I have this question from a constituent that's a little bit sensitive. This person would like to know how the administration or how the provost's office plans to cope with the probability that those faculty members in high-risk groups who should not be in a face-to-face classroom are also, as a group, less likely to be experts in online teaching.
We're providing a lot of
I think
professional.
this faculty member, sorry, I think this faculty member is probably referring to age.
Right. I will say that we are doing, Gary Carini is leading an effort right now to really ramp up the professional development that we can provide for online teaching. My understanding is this is something people can learn. And we have great resources here. We have great models. He's setting up a system of faculty mentoring other faculty. Faculty who have been very successful, providing support for faculty who have some learning to do in terms of how to manage this new online environment. But I guess that's where I would focus, is trying to get that faculty member really up to speed, because the students are counting on Baylor quality, and a lot of what happened in the spring, faculty had to change really quickly. And a lot of, and did so very well. But teaching, putting your materials online and teaching remotely for a couple of months is different than designing an online course soup to nuts. And that's the kind of professional development that we're going to be focusing on over the summer, is so that faculty can understand how to create that kind of course. And I think that our students will expect that kind of quality, and it will be on them to do that.
Thanks. Sarah Alexander? You might be muted, Sarah. Sarah?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
So thank you both for your time today and for all of your efforts as well. I have two related questions, and one relates to Kurt's question about hardship. And so I have a constituent who has two high-risk individuals in her household, though she technically is not high risk. And so she's wondering if there's any way she can teach online, given the fact that she's living with two high-risk individuals. So I'll just sort of add that to your quote-unquote hardship list, I guess, of a different kind of situation.
I would probably count her as high risk.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think she's hoping that she could possibly teach online as a result of that situation. So I guess she will work with her chair on that as well, as you said, but I wanted to get that in everybody's head, that some people may. And then the second, which is somewhat related, is, I'm going to read this because I'm not sure I can. Do faculty who are high risk, at what level of disclosure must they give? I guess this person is hesitant to want to disclose a lot of personal information to people about the nature of their high risk. So it's sort of, I guess the question has to do with what kind of information one has to provide. Who do you provide it to? Do you provide it to the chair? Does there need to be some level of documentation? And they even mentioned the HIPAA law. So I'm just presenting that to you because I don't know what those details are.
Yeah, I don't think at this point we're requiring a high level of disclosure. What we would just like people to do is to, let their department chair know that they have some risk factors that, and for that reason, they're requesting an online assignment. I don't think it needs at this point to be more detailed than that.
Okay. I'll assure them of that.
Thanks,
I
Sarah.
have others, but they're on different topics. So I'll wait my turn.
Okay, we're a little bit beyond the halfway point for our 90-minute Q&A now. So Jim Eller, you're up next.
Yes, sir. Thank you all for being present and for this conversation. I spend a great deal of my copious spare time working with EMS and with first response. And in an environment where this last week there was an accident out on I-35 and suddenly 2 fire crews and 2 ambulance crews had to be put on quarantine because it turned out the patient had COVID. Things change in a drop of a hat. One of the questions I'm getting from my constituents is, why are we so vague? Well, you know what? There's a tension between vague and being honest. And the first thing they teach us in first response is you don't ever tell a lie. Problem is that if you don't know, then making it up doesn't help. And in fact, it makes it more hurtful for the people who are already in pain. So thank you for that, walking that tightrope, because that's a tough one. One question I do have with regard to the cleaning of the buildings, I hear you talking about working on campus, but how about all of the various buildings outside of the Baylor bubble? Are we working with those companies to be sure that they also get cleaned? And my constituents would like some concern with that. We, of course, have campuses in Dallas and Houston and off-campus Baylor and Austin. There are all kinds of buildings that are not Baylor bubble and therefore not controlled by the direct cleaning crews at Baylor. Are we working with them to be sure that they get the same amount of clean down? I have a second question, but wait for an answer on this first one because it's sort of different.
The answer is yes. That's part of the 824. That's one of our issues on our 824 list.
Okay, thank you. That's real helpful because we're not seeing much in some of those locations, and looking forward to seeing that. The second question is that I have heard from a number of different sources that there is sort of a tentative phase-in plan, if this, then that, which could include not starting until November or starting, full up in August, and there's kind of a range between all of that. Could you walk us through what is officially being thought about on that at this point, and how each one of those options might impact our faculty and teaching?
Nancy, let me say something just about phasing over the summer, then you can talk about the different models for fall. That, and I know you're talking really about fall, James, but we are, and there will be an announcement with more detail, I think on Friday of this week, about kind of return to work over the summer for folks. That will affect faculty far less than it will affect staff, since faculty are really working remotely, unless there's research elements of labs and other things that you have to be back on campus for. But we will have more communication about that process that will begin really middle of May, first part of June, to kind of begin transitioning staff and then eventually faculty back to campus, so that by fall we're ready, assuming we can actually get started on August 24th. But Nancy, I'll defer to you on some of the different models that are sort of being considered depending on how this goes in the fall.
So the planning right now is focused on having an on-campus experience in the fall, and creating the capability of offering the full educational curriculum with a lot of mitigation for potential for risk, if you will. We are planning for what I think is the hardest scenario first. I think that planning to offer the undergraduate and graduate curriculum with 6-foot distancing in place is probably the most challenging scenario. So if the situation lightens up, I think that moving to a less restrictive environment is something that can be managed pretty easily. And I think also we're going to do the planning for a fully online semester and know what we need to do to offer us the semester fully online if we have to. So we're going to have several different plans that we'll have to create. And then honestly, to some degree, we're going to have to be flexible. I will tell you my nightmare scenario is I don't want to see opening and closing and opening and closing and opening and closing. I think that's a really bad outcome. What I'd rather do is put in very conservative measures that prevent outbreaks on campus so that we can provide as safe a campus as possible so that we don't have to do that, so that we've got something that is sustainable for the long haul. That's the overall goal. Does that help?
Yes, thank you. I think that gets us started. Obviously, there's more to come on that.
Right.
Then again, there's more information all the way around to come.
Yeah.
So thank you for your
Yeah.
flexibility and support.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks, Provost Brickhouse. Up next is Coretta.
I have a question about promotions from colleagues. Will promotions be allowed to move forward? That's the first part of the question. Will lecturers who are promoted to senior lecturer receive raises that are consistent with amounts awarded in previous years?
Yes and yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. That's easy. Lynn Tatum. You're muted, Lynn.
Am I here?
Yep, there you are.
Okay. Well, thank you for being here. I got a quick question that's kind of personal. Has to do with Tidwell, I think is scheduled to be, as last I heard, we have to be out of Tidwell on May 21st because of everything that has happened. It's a possibility that could be pushed back a little bit so that we don't have to all descend upon Tidwell immediately to move out.
So I have been working really carefully with Brett Dalton on this, and he is working on a plan that will be safe. And that is more important than meeting an arbitrary deadline.
Okay.
He is well aware of the safety concerns, and we will have a plan in place, but exactly when that's going to be, I can't tell you right now.
Well,
but it will be when we have a plan that we think meets the concerns of the very reasonable concerns.
Well, the sooner it gets communicated that there is at least a plan, because some of us are kind of panicking that we feel like we have to get back now to pack.
The problem is that the plan is still under construction. It's
Gotcha.
close, but it's still under construction.
Gotcha. I appreciate that. Could I ask actually a little bit of a larger question, which is there has been concern among some faculty members that a lot of important COVID decisions have been made and are continuing to be made without faculty sort of being in the room where those decisions are made. So in the spirit of shared governance, would you be willing to include in your top level decision-making a representative or two selected by the faculty? This would ensure that the decisions are being fully informed by those in the trenches. For example, I noticed that Denise is not in on the conversations about commencement, and that just strikes me that it would be a lot smarter. We'd make better decisions to have faculty actually in the room for these decisions.
So I can talk, the COVID-19 group that I convene on a weekly basis is a lot of faculty actually. and Brian Rains has been really a terrific contributor to that group. I expect that that group will continue to meet in an ongoing basis, probably at least until the fall, maybe beyond that, who knows? So
the other thing I would add is the COVID, not the COVID-19 task force, but the 824 project. There are faculty that are advisory to that group. Eva Doyle from the public health, Ben Ryan, who is an expert in how you bring communities back after crises and disasters. I think there's a couple others that are being added to that. So Lynn, I appreciate that. And we'll certainly be sensitive that we're trying certainly to engage the right faculty in the right places that have expertise as we address these issues. I do expect as well, I know we're putting somebody from the libraries on that advisory group because the libraries have different issues than others. Dennis O'Neill's an expert on facilities
and Brian's being added to the advisory committee.
Yeah, Brian Brooks, yeah. So I'm sorry, Brian
Rains.
Oh, Brian Rains, I'm sorry, wrong Brian. Hey, Brian. So we're working on that, and we absolutely will be sensitive to that as we sort of have, because we're going to have a lot of people involved on a lot of these different issues. There's going to be absolutely probably a lot of opportunity for faculty engagement involvement. So I appreciate that reminder, Lynn.
And it would be nice if the faculty senate sort of had some say in proposing some folks on these committees. I think it gives the decisions more credibility with the faculty.
Okay, appreciate that.
Thanks, Lynn. So I am going to ask a question from the Q&A. So Anjong Wong is actually on the faculty senate, but I think he's on the list of it. He's on the attendees for some reason. I think there must have been an issue with his link. So he typed in the Q&A though, are there funds set aside to support online teaching, such as to buy some computer programs? In physics, there are also courses with labs. If the students cannot come to the labs to do their experiments, there are possibilities, for example, sending some packages to them so they can do the experiments at home. After that, they send the packages back to the faculty. Of course, these have costs, and I wonder if there are funds set aside to support such activities.
I have set aside some resources specifically for that.
Thanks.
In fact, I'm growing my classroom technology fund this year.
Okay, terrific.
The other thing I would add to that, Brian, is one of the reasons we didn't ask the academic areas to cut their operating budgets was because we knew there would be these kinds of things that came up this fall if we have to do learning in a little bit different way. So we wanted to give the academic units more flexibility to have those resources to do that. So both through the provost office and then frankly at the school and department levels, hopefully we'll absolutely have to find ways to support those kinds of things.
Thanks. A question that I've had emailed to me many times and has also arrived on the Q&A is at what point or is there a plan, maybe is a better way of phrasing it, is there a plan to dip into endowment if the budget gets, the budget crisis worsens?
Well, our plan right now is to protect the endowment. Protecting the corpus of the endowment is really important to the long-term health and well-being of the institution. And in fact, one of our primary goals from a fundraising perspective and a managing the endowment perspective is to grow that endowment over time, because that helps us manage our expenses in other places and push more support to faculty and students. So that would be a very, very last resort effort to dip into the corpus of your endowment. It is not a strategy that any institution wants to do early in the process because it has really negative implications over the long run. It might look good in the short run, but it's really hard, really hurts an institution for the long run. But you know, it's a tool that's there, but not one that we hope that we aren't in a situation that's that desperate that we would have to do that. But I understand why it would be a question that folks would ask.
Thanks. Up next is Maxie Parrish.
Okay, thank you. And I'd like to echo everyone's gratitude for you being here. One of the first changes that we saw when this situation occurred, for very obvious reasons, was the cancellation of summer study abroad programs. Has a decision been made on fall programs, or is there a timetable to do that given the long-term nature of planning for these types of programs?
So I have been working with Jeff Hamilton on this. Obviously, we would love to have study abroad programs begin in the fall and the spring and begin planning for next summer. I will say, I think the, Baylor in Scotland program looks like it would probably be very much a green light. Some of the other study abroad programs look a little risky, particularly programs that require students to travel within Europe. They're not even going to a place and staying, they're traveling around. So my guess is that those decisions are going to be made on a case-by-case basis, based on the circumstances on the ground. And because those circumstances change, my hunch is that the final decision on those probably will not be made for another month or two.
Thank you.
But I think it's fine to go ahead and start planning for the summer of 21, but we don't know what the circumstances are going to be.
Thank you.
I would just like to add that our folks that did the international study this spring and had to pick up those programs and bring them home, I just can't say enough about the faculty and staff and the way they managed that. And I think we got everybody home without anybody being sick or having any issues, and it was hard, and we had canceled flights and lots of uncertainty, and it's just really commend the staff that supported those and the faculty that were on those trips. It was a very kind of risky situation, and really got everybody home safe and sound and back to their homes, and everybody did what they were supposed to and were healthy through the process. So I was really pleased with how that went.
Thanks.
I should also say it's not just abroad programs, but the Baylor in Washington program. I was in conversations about that earlier today, whether or not that would run in the fall. And there we're going to be looking at what's going on in Washington, and staying in touch with colleagues at Georgetown and George Mason. We probably don't want to be the only university operating in Washington, D.C. So I'm afraid it's going to be on a very case-by-case basis, and it depends on where they are. And but yeah.
Thank you. Jason McGregor, you're up next. Before you start though, I should note we only have about 20 minutes remaining. There's a lot of questions that we'd like to get answers to. I can work, for some of you guys are typing questions in the Q&A, I'll work to get those questions answered. But maybe if it doesn't get answered and it's really pressing, email me directly, or Matt Corden. He is the chair-elect. If you go to our website, you'll see me and Matt there. Email one of us and we'll work with the Provost's office to get your questions, to get answers for you. All right, Jason McGregor.
Thank you again for being here. My question relates to the year that we're having. As a faculty member, just teaching plans, research plans, everything's been kind of interrupted. And even thinking about the fall, planning courses that I might have to teach online or in person or different scenarios, has there been any consideration to perhaps not doing faculty evaluations next spring? Because how would you possibly evaluate a faculty member of not meeting expectations when none of us know what to expect on a daily basis?
Well, I hear the concern. Things are very, very different. And I guess for a department chair that thinks of evaluation in a very kind of tick the box manner, it can be a problem. But I think faculty evaluations can be a real asset, and that an understanding department chair knows the context in which the faculty member has been operating, and should be able to make adjustments accordingly. So I would be pretty reluctant to simply forego faculty evaluations. It's also incredibly important for pre-tenure faculty to get that input. So yeah, I think that there's still added value and having faculty evaluations even in times of change. I'm doing evaluations of all the deans and VPs. You know, there's no pay associated with it. It's just a time to look back over the last year and ask the question of, you know, where did we excel? Where did we fall short? How can we better support one another so that the university can meet its goals? It's just an opportunity to have those kinds of conversations in a way, in a very developmental way as well.
Thanks. Up next is Horace Maxwell.
Yes, very quick question. Thank you all for your time. I have a question about our hearing impaired members of the Baylor community. Some people rely on lip reading and the combo of sound and lip reading. Face mask and social distancing will obviously affect that. So more of a, I guess, a question and a raising an awareness. If faculty and staff rely on lip reading and that kind of thing, what measures can be put in place, or is that something that's on your radar right now?
It is now. I would say that is an accommodation that the faculty needs to be made known to the department chair.
Okay.
And the accommodations need to be made.
Okay, thank you much.
Thanks. Holly Collins.
Are there any adjustments being made to the attendance policy for the fall semester? And is there any consideration for also having a pass-fail system like we had this semester in the fall?
The attendance policies will definitely have to be examined. These are special times. It will be incredibly important for faculty to recognize that students may be under quarantine, they could fall ill, and that some of those attendance policies will need to be relaxed. They may need to be able to count as attending by being online as opposed to face-to-face, for example, as well. So we'll definitely be looking at relaxing those policies. You're the first person to bring up the issue of pass-fail for the fall. Congratulations. I don't know. I mean, I'm not there yet, but more than happy to have that conversation.
Thanks. Up next, we have Sarah Alexander.
Well, Holly didn't intend it, but she gave me a good lead in because I had two different people ask me a similar question, which is, what if I have a situation in an in-person classroom where I have this revolving door, or I don't know what percent of students who are not well and not in the classroom, such that I end up, the faculty member ends up sort of teaching a hybrid online in-person class because students are ill, many students are ill. And so the person was actually asking, what is Baylor doing in terms of the dormitory situation, in terms of living situations for the students to help hopefully curtail high rates of them becoming ill so that in the classroom we don't have situations like that. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. You know,
can you hear me?
Yeah, it's a fair question, a good question.
Kind of a convoluted question.
Well, the Project 824 is looking at residence hall issues and what is appropriate there. All universities are debating whether they should go to single rooms. Our challenge is we only have 2,500 rooms on campus, and we have over 3,000, hopefully, freshmen coming in the fall. So we don't actually have enough beds on our campus for our freshmen in single rooms, and that doesn't count all the others that you'd push off into campus. So we're looking at different options for that and how we would manage that. Clearly part of it's cleanliness. Some of our residence halls would be higher risk than others, those that have community bathrooms and narrow halls, some of the older ones. So all of those issues are being taken into consideration as we look at how we want to manage living in the residence halls in the fall, recognizing that that is a place where and dining facilities as well, where it might be easier than other places for some of this to pass. one of the other challenges we have with students, no matter what we do with them on campus, we have no control of what they do off campus. And we know even from those that are still around campus this summer that they're not social distancing off campus, as they're all, we've got quite a few of them living off campus this summer. So, you know, there's going to always be these risky situations with young people that don't always follow the guidelines you give them. But we certainly are going to do everything we can and what we have control of to try to put guidelines and restrictions in place that protect us as much as possible. But we can't keep them from going off campus into large groups and doing things we wish they didn't. But that's always been the case with college students, completely unrelated to this. So, but we are looking at residence halls and how we handle those.
Thank you. Up next, we have Coretta Pittman.
I have a kind of a long question. It's a compensation question.
Okay.
All right, here we go. With the merit raises that are being delayed until January 2021, we rolled onto merit raises for that academic year, effectively getting us caught up to where we should be, or will those raises replace the merit raise for the 2021-2022 academic year?
You know, we don't have the answer to that as yet. I mean, what we do, we deferred that decision to January of 2021, and we'll just have to look at the financial situation at that point in time and determine whether or not things are looking good enough that we feel like we could make that retroactive or not, or whether we just feel like we can't extend that at all given the financial situation. So I wish I could give a more definitive answer than that, but it is something we're going to have to monitor as we go into the fall, and then as we see kind of what's happening with spring enrollment and frankly what's happening with the virus at that time and how much uncertainty there still remains in the environment.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Kurt Nichols.
Yeah, hi, thank you. I didn't want to be the guy asking this question, quite honestly. You know, there's more diplomatic members of the Senate, let me put it that way. But the Senate did spend 2 special sessions and 5 hours, I think, this last month discussing the topic. And so I think it only fair, it's been on a lot of people's minds and a lot of people are interested in it. So I think it is a fair question to ask. I'll try to ask it as maybe diplomatically as I can by being very precise about it. But the question, of course, deals with the future funding of the retirement benefits. And we all know that the cuts that have been made are necessary. I don't think anyone is arguing otherwise. I think the question comes down to a technical one, in my opinion. Is in 2 years, and thank you, by the way, for agreeing to revisit it in 2 years. That I know has been movement, and we appreciate that. But in 2 years, will the default position be that the faculty needs to justify getting the increase back, or will the default be in 2 years that the administration will have to justify keeping the 8% versus the 10 point whatever percent?
You know, I don't really think about it as being a default position in either one of those directions as we go into that. I think what we'll do is a very honest review of that program and the contribution that we're making to that program, given the financial situation at the time and how we've gotten through all of this. And so I hope that what we have is a collaborative process for reviewing that program and coming to agreement on what makes the most sense for our faculty and staff, as well as for the financial health of the university. So I don't have a preconceived idea of what the default position is going into that. And with so much uncertainty, it's hard to know what direction we'll need to go when we get to that point in time. But we absolutely will work with faculty on that review and how best to move forward with the retirement program at that point in time.
Thank you. I'm going to ask a question from the Q&A. Is there a defined set of criteria for closing campus if COVID-19 arises on campus during the fall semester, even with implementations of planned adjustments to campus instruction, student life?
I think that's the 824, Project 824 is actually working on a scorecard that can provide guidance for those kinds of decisions. It's not done yet, so you know, I can't tell you exactly what those criteria are, but I will say that it is on our radar screen as one of the problems that we need to address.
Okay. And it would be something we would do in collaboration too with the local health public health officials and city and such, as well as we look at what's going on in the community and ensuring that we're doing what's best for the community in addition to what's best for Baylor.
That makes sense. Several faculty have emailed me to ask if we're considering going to shorter terms, maybe mini-mesters, multiple mini-mesters, that kind of thing. Any comments there?
I love that model. I will just put my cards on the table. I love the Colorado College model. I think there are good pedagogical reasons for that argue for that model. I think that doing that while we're doing everything else is just a bridge too far. I had brought it up in various meetings that I've been a part of, and it doesn't seem to get a lot of traction. And I think it's just because we're pretty saturated with the kind of change that needs to happen in order to deliver the semester, the fall semester, and breaking it up into smaller chunks. Again, it seems like a bridge too far right now.
And am I remembering correctly, Nancy, from one of our COVID-19 leadership meetings that someone in financial aid said all the financial aid packages would have to be redesigned if we did that?
It's not just the curriculum that's affected. Right. It's actually even more complicated than that. So, but I love those ideas, by the way. Even if we're not yet to the point to where we can go there.
And I do think one of the things that's going to come out of this, and I'll use summer school for an example, like we've never done summer school for incoming freshmen or for rising seniors in high school, and yet we're having huge success with that this summer. So I think we're going to learn things from this that actually say, oh my gosh, we should just do that all the time, or we should adapt what we're doing. So I think that any of these creative ideas, even if we can't do them right now, if we think there's something we should consider for the longer run, we're sort of all learning how to do things differently and learning to be flexible. So I think it's a tremendous opportunity to truly rethink the way we do some things and say, you know, we've always done it this way, but maybe there really are better ways to do it that are better pedagogically, better for the learning environment. And frankly, we kind of have an opportunity now to be disruptive because we're being disrupted. So
that's very true. Thank you. Lynn, you're up. Unmute yourself, Lynn.
Yeah, okay.
There you go. We can hear you now.
I want to be wherever Lynn is. That looks very pleasant.
Yeah, out in the backyard. My house is a mess. And I think it's good that you're communicating to the entire faculty. I think that does release down a lot of tensions. But I did have one final question. We're releasing a lot of adjuncts that have been teaching here for years. This, as we all know, is painful. We had a plan to hire a bunch of postdocs. Are we continuing to do the hiring, new hires on the postdocs while we're releasing the?
I'm so glad that you brought that up. I mean, the postdoc program is alive and well, and there would be nothing that Larry Lyon would love more than to hear from you about your interest in that program. If you go to his website, you can see that program is very much alive and well.
Nancy, I think Lynn might be referring to the OVPR postdocs. Are those the ones you're referring to, Lynn?
No, I just the postdoc. We had a plan to hire a bunch of postdocs, but we're letting a lot of adjuncts. I was wondering how that balances.
There are two plans. One is housed in the OVPR. The other one is housed in the grad school. The one in the grad school is designed to allow grad students who are finishing this year and maybe are having trouble on the job market to keep them around an extra year as teaching postdocs. The other program is research postdocs. Were you thinking of one versus the other?
No, but I like to explain. What is the situation with those two?
Well, both of them are still moving ahead.
Okay.
Hold on. Both are moving ahead, and I would encourage you, if you, I know that there are some departments that graduate students don't teach very much, and they could actually benefit from having some teaching experience, and we want to support them in doing that. That's what the teaching postdoc program in the graduate school is all about.
Okay.
Is providing that opportunity. The other postdoc program is for research postdocs. Those postdocs are largely already hired, so that is moving ahead as well. Now, whether or not we'll add 20 more next year, I think that is still to be determined. But the ones that are already hired, with the exception of a few that may not be able to get here because of where they currently are.
Yeah.
So we expect most of them will be on campus in the fall.
Thanks. Karen LeCompte was going to ask a question, I think, from the Q&A. Go ahead, Karen.
Yes, this is from the Q&A. How do we balance a reduction in adjunct faculty and the need to have potentially smaller section sizes with more instructors to teach those sections? I know that we will increase some faculty loads, but that will be not enough. That will not be enough to meet all of the instructional needs.
So we'll need to work that out on a case by case basis. I realize we need to deliver the curriculum in the fall, and so if I need to provide some help there, if the department's doing the right things in terms of the faculty teaching, I'm definitely going to be meeting you halfway so that we can deliver the curriculum in the fall.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to ask another question. This will be our final question. What are we planning in regards to human subject research, which requires face-to-face contact, such as recording brain activity using an EEG cap? Should we assume that if a grant-funded project is not social distancing compatible, that it will need to be postponed beyond the fall semester?
Depending on what the actual requirements are at the time, we'll need to deal with those on a case-by-case basis. I would encourage you to reach out to the Office of the Vice Provost for Research and get some guidance there.
Thanks. Well, we've come to the end of our time. Thank you so much, President Livingston and Provost Brickhouse, for being with us today. I think the last 90 minutes have been very helpful, very informative for all of us. Thanks, and we look forward to working together closely as more issues, I'm sure, arise over the summer and into the fall.
Well, we appreciate all the questions, great questions. And I know if there were some that didn't get answered, let us know and we'll certainly get answers back to you all on those. But thank you so much for all you're doing for the university and for our students. And hopefully you'll have safe and healthy summers and can actually get out a little bit this summer. So
that would be great. That would be great.
We know that COVID-19 doesn't spread that well outside.
Yeah, it's easy to social distance out in the woods.
Yep.
Thank you. And
Thank you.
anyone still watching the stream, if your question didn't get answered, feel free to email me or email Matt Corden. You can find him. He's on the Faculty Senate website. We will be glad to work closely with the Provost Office to get the questions answered. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So now we will turn to the regular Faculty Senate meeting that this is actually part of. That was just our first portion. Jason, maybe unmute yourself for a second, Jason. What would be the correct parliamentary way for all of us to have a 5-minute break and stretch our legs?
The chair declares a recess.
Okay, well, how about that? I will declare is 5 minutes enough of a recess or do we need more like 10? 5 minutes? 5 minutes. Okay, 5-minute recess starting now. I'm turning off my camera and my microphone. I'll be back in 5 minutes. Hello, everybody. Do we still have attendee? We still have more attendees. Okay. I am going to go ahead and I'm going to call us back to order after our 5-minute break. I will let us look at the agenda. Okay. The next item on our agenda is the approval of our minutes. Michael Long, do you want to say anything about the minutes if you're there? Are you back, Michael?
I'm here. I don't know if I need to say anything. All I can say is that if someone sees that they're not mentioned as present at a given meeting and they're not on the list, but they were present, just to let me know, because it was really difficult in those days to figure out who actually was there. That's all I would say.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I think in this format, it is a little tricky. We were using Microsoft Teams for some of the meetings. One of them was on WebEx. Several have been on Zoom. So I think tracking attendance has been challenging. So if you look at the minutes and you notice that you're marked absent and you weren't absent, please let us know. Other discussion about the minutes?
I make a motion that we approve the minutes from the April and the March meetings.
Thank you, Karen. Do we have a second? Jason McGregor seconded. So did Michael Stroop. All in favor? Actually, we'll do like this. If you do not have an objection to adopting the minutes as written, modulo possible adjustments for attendance, then just remain silent and speak up if you have an objection. All right, I'm hearing no objections, so the minutes have been adopted. Thank you all. Up next, we have the recognition of outgoing senators. So I have before me maybe, I have these beautiful little plaques. I don't know if you guys can see this. Maybe I'll make my thing the spotlight video. Yeah, so isn't that cool? So I have these for everybody. So I'm going to go through real quick and just hold them up. So Jim Eller, thank you for your last, I think it's been 6 years of service. Yay, Jim. Kathy Hurt.
Kathy, yay.
Is it, I think it's been 6 years, Kathy. I think you and I have been on 6 years together. Michael Corpy, thank you for your service. I don't know for sure if it's 3 or 6. Sorry, should have looked. Brian Lutholtz, thank you for your service to the Faculty Senate. Dorothy Leidner, thank you for your service to the Senate. Jason McGregor, thank you for your service. Bill Nielsen, thank you. Kurt Nichols, thank you for your service to the Senate. Mike Stroop, thank you. Randy Umstead, thank you for your service to the Senate. And finally, I suspect you often are last in lists like this, Stanley Wilfong, thank you for your service to the Faculty Senate. So this little plaque says, in grateful recognition of Stanley Wilfong for valuable service on the Baylor University Faculty Senate, May 2020. They all say that with the names changed, obviously. I will work to get these delivered as we phase back in on campus. How do I, okay, I'm gonna cancel that. So as we phase back in on campus, I'll work to get these delivered to you all. But anyway, thank you very much, all of you, for your service for the last 3 or 6 years. The next item on our agenda is the welcome of new senators, and I'm going to turn that over to Matt Corden, who's chair-elect, but he'll be chair come August 1st.
Before I introduce the new senators, I want to recognize Brian. When I became the chair of the Senate in 2007, the chairs who preceded me were the late Jim Patton, the late Joe Cox, Diana Batanza, Eric Robinson, and all of them warned me it's going to suck away every minute of time you have. And none of us went through a crisis like this because none of us have gone through a crisis in our lives like this. I can't tell you how outstanding of a job Brian did. If we were in a live meeting, I would suggest we have a 5-minute standing ovation. So this plaque doesn't really, this is so understated, but I want to at least show the plaque. And I hope that when we meet in, hopefully live in the retreat in August, we can really thank Brian for the incredibly effective work he's done. But says, thank you, Brian Rains, for your outstanding leadership as Faculty Senate Chair 2019. 2020. Again, I hope everybody can reach out to Brian and thank him for the work. The executive committee also has another gift, and it's.
I'm done.
So you got a T-shirt.
Thank you. So. That's great. And I'll point out, Matt, your next year, your last year as chair of the Faculty Senate was pretty monumental. I think the next year is going to be, well, maybe more monumental. The Senate's going to have a lot of work to do next year, so I'm really glad for all the new faculty senators and you, Matt, as chair-elect. Thank you.
I'm filling big shoes. Brian, Randy, Ann McGlashan, Byron Newberry, Ron Beal. We've just had some great chairs, so I'm trying to fill big shoes. But Kathy had something.
I don't know if you're monitoring chat, but this is still going out on YouTube Live. So, and there are a number of people here who I suspect are not senators. I'm fine with that, but I wanted to make sure the chair was aware of it.
I think unless we go into executive session, I officially invited all of the faculty to attend our meeting. And the same thing with the YouTube. I just was adding something back to the YouTube stream. We still, last time I checked, we still had 14 or 15 people watching on YouTube. If we need to go into executive session, we can, and I can shut down the live stream and the YouTube stream. But I've invited them all as guests for the Faculty Senate meeting.
So I'm going to go ahead and list the new senators. We have 3 from the College of Arts and Sciences: Dwight Ullman from Political Science, Gerald Cleaver from Physics, Julie Holcomb from Museum Studies. We have 1 from Social Work, Alyssa Madden. We have 1 from Truett Seminary, Angela Reed. We have 3 from the School of Business, Gia Chevis, Tisha Emerson, and Lorenco Paz. We have 1 from Honors College, Sam Perry. We have 1 from the School of Music, Ann Shoemaker. And we have 2 from Robbins College, Christy Gant and Ann Terrio. So welcome to the Senate.
Thanks, Matt, and thanks to all of you for being willing to serve. The next 2 to 3 years are going to be really interesting in the university, and I think we play a very important role as representatives of the faculty. So thanks for being willing to do that. Okay, the next item on the agenda are the reports. The first report is my report from the Provost's office meeting. I think that you got a pretty good gist from just now from the Q&A, the kinds of things we've been dealing with in the Provost's office. I'm also on, like Nancy mentioned, I'm on the COVID-19 Leadership Task Force. I assume in the fall, Matt will be added to that. We have been meeting not daily anymore or every other day, but weekly now. We started talking about the fall semester last week. It looks like it's going to be interesting in that we're going to have to probably reschedule a lot of the courses. The idea would be first, it's sort of this layer cake approach. I think Nancy alluded to it. The first step is faculty identify if they are willing to teach online or if they want to teach online. I shouldn't say it that way. If they're in a risk group and they need to teach online. So if that's the case, we take this pile of instructors, move them out of the schedule, give them, move them into the online, and then now we have rooms we can use to rebuild the schedule. The schedule will likely go from 8 in the morning until 10 at night. We're being told that the classroom capacity is basically 25% of what it would normally be. So if you're teaching in a 40 student classroom now, you can only have 10 students in the room at a time to allow for social distancing. So this means that we're going to need, I think they've identified 20 classrooms that can, even with this reduced, with 25% enrollment, they can still handle between 20 and 80 students. So we're hoping to use those 20 classrooms from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. for slightly larger sections. For most of us, it might mean we're going to be teaching some kind of a hybrid style where we have a class of 30 where 10 of the students come in on Monday, 10 of them come in on Wednesday, and 10 of them come in on Friday. And then we stream our lectures. There's a plan, I think, in the business school, or maybe it was the School of Ed, to stream lectures to the students and then meet in smaller groups to kind of have discussion. The registrar's office is working with each dean's office to implement this. The dean's offices are meant to be working with the departments. And they are trying to get the schedule redone by kind of, I think Nancy said today, Memorial Day. I've seen June 8th as a target day also because that's when freshmen begin registering. The idea would not be to have students all kicked out and then they go back in and pick their classes, but rather a mapping over between a current course schedule and a new course schedule. I don't know for sure how that will work in practice, but that's the current plan as I understand it. Step one is where we are right now, trying to identify which faculty are in the high risk category or in a high risk category and are moving their teaching entirely online for the fall. You guys have any questions for me about this? That's been the main topic.
I have one question.
Yeah, Karen.
Who determines capacity for a particular classroom? Is there?
Yeah, it's EHS, so Environmental Health and Safety, along with the facilities group also is involved in it. We're told that 36 square feet is the right amount for each individual. It is the 36 square feet if you imagine yourself in the center of a square 6 by 6. I'm a mathematician, so sorry about that. If you imagine yourself in the center of a square 6 by 6 square, and someone else is in the center of their 6 by 6 square, you're 3 feet from any boundary. They're 3 feet. So if you're two boundaries, you can stay 6 feet apart if you allow 36 square feet per person. That might be more detail than you want to know. So I think that's basically what they're doing. In some cases, like in instructional labs, they're actually having to reduce it a little more, like computer labs, where there's a 6-foot table with 2 computers on it. You have to go even more. You have to allow even more than a 6-foot distance because you basically can just use every other computer. You can't use 2 computers on the same desk in that model. So it's going to be complicated and kind of interesting.
Okay, thank you.
You bet.
Kind of a follow-up to that, maybe a silly question, but are they going to actually remove desks from rooms, or are people just responsible for spacing themselves out?
I haven't heard any plan to remove desks, but the idea is they'll be told to social distance. And then they'll be only, in a class of 40, they'll have 10 students at a time.
Hey, Holly, let me jump in for just a second. That may be managed on a unit by unit basis, because I know those are conversations we've had in the School of Music, is removing desks, because I think maybe underlying in your question is we can't really trust students to do that on their own. They're going to need some help. And if we remove the option, it makes it easier.
Yeah, there's also the thought, now, are we being made into monitors and policemen?
No, I haven't heard anything to that effect. I think there's going to be extensive signage and a lot of email conversation, a lot of training on the students' end. Are the students going to actually socially distance while they're here? I haven't met anyone who's optimistic that they will, but the plan is to at least make it possible in the classrooms. So another item go ahead, Lynn, did you want to say something? Anyone who wants to say something, you can type in the chat to be recognized, or you can just speak up as well. Lynn, go ahead. I can't see everyone right now, so if I can't see you and you're raising your hand, I'm not meaning to ignore you.
Has there been any talk about allowing some faculty to reduce their teaching load, go on maybe a half-time, even a half-time unpaid leave? I would be I feel like I'm being pushed into either risk my health or not being seen as cooperative. So I was wondering if we could, if the administration would be open to some people taking a voluntary leave of absence without it affecting their permanent status, or even a voluntary 1/3 leave of absence.
Yeah, I haven't heard anything to that effect, Lynn. I'll raise it. I know we do have a leave of absence policy, so it is possible for a faculty member to take an unpaid leave of absence. So that's something you could talk to your chair or your dean about, but I'll raise it also in the provost office meetings.
I don't think we've got one that's a partial leave of absence.
Yeah, I haven't heard of a partial leave. So, but if you're taking an unpaid leave is what it sounded like you were doing.
No, there are some classes I would feel comfortable teaching, and other classes, mainly the very large classes, I would feel much more nervous about.
Yeah. Well, I know that the plan is calling for trying to get, so after step 1 happens where we identify the faculty who are high risk, the next thing is we figure out which of the large sections need to be done online. So the idea is we're trying to make sure that freshmen, by and large, will have face-to-face experiences. So the large freshman sections are probably going to be the ones that are prioritized for the few rooms that can handle them, the larger sections. So yeah, that's step 2 is identifying which large sections are going online. Any other discussion on what I've been hearing about the fall? We're not going to have good answers or complete answers for several weeks. Another item, Maxie, go ahead, Maxie.
Yes, thank you. Can you clarify what you were talking about meeting a section of classes several times a week? Because so let's say you meet a class 3 times a week. Now you've got 9 lectures?
No, no, that's not what I'm sorry if I wasn't clear at all.
No, I'm sorry. That's probably me.
So the idea would be I have a section of currently I'm supposed to teach like 150 in a calculus class, but let's say I'm teaching 40 in calculus. Okay, that's my current schedule. My room can hold 40. With 25% fill, it can now only hold 10 for socially distancing. So what I do is I have a webcam in the room and a microphone on my lapel.
Okay.
I have a group of 10 that's assigned to the Monday in-person group, a different group of 10 that comes on the Wednesday, and a different on Friday. My office hours are still open to all 30. Now my class went from 40 to 30.
I see. Right?
To make it work. For Tuesday, Thursday, you have to cut the class in half. So that's one example of a hybrid approach.
Okay.
So and then if we're not social distancing, which I can't imagine that we won't be, but if we aren't, we have 30 students that are just meeting in a Monday, Wednesday, Friday class that could accommodate 40 normally.
I see. Okay, thank you.
Now, there is a chance that some faculty will have to teach more because as we shrink section sizes, there'll be more students that are left over to teach. I've asked the provost personally a couple of times. I know it was one of the Q&A questions that Karen raised. How do we accommodate increasing the number of sections that we'll probably have to do with a slightly smaller enrollment in each section, while at the same time trying to reduce the number of temporary lecturers? I don't see those as compatible at all. Anything else on that? Christy.
Yes, Brian. Hi, everyone. I'm from the Doctorate of Physical Therapy program, and we have 100 students at a time in a lab. And I haven't heard discussions about labs. We've been talking about didactic courses. What about big labs? Are you guessing it's going to be the same thing? We're going to have to split those labs up into small groups like that?
Yeah, that's what I'm afraid of. The provost asked the deans last week to start working on a plan for instructional labs. And so the plans are being handled more locally, maybe department by department on exactly what their lab can accommodate. The 36 square foot per student calculation doesn't always work in a lab or a computer lab, just because of the furniture configurations. So each room probably has to be reassessed for its maximum capacity.
All right, thank you.
You bet. Other questions? There's some other items. Okay, Renee, go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna comment on Christy's question. So at the School of Nursing, where we normally would have
20 to 25 students in a lab, we're being told that that has to be cut extremely more than in half. So we're still working on a final plan, but labs will definitely be affected.
Right. Yeah, I think the most optimistic that I've seen for labs is 50% reduction in enrollment per room. Most labs, I think, are probably going to be more like 25% left over, so 75% reduction in enrollment, like the classroom. So the classrooms of 40 now can handle 10 for the fall.
And I think what we're also going to need to look at is, for us, it's human to human contact. The lab's the only way we teach the lab. So I'm guessing we're going to get, right now we have delayed or postponed all of our labs from April all the way till August, hoping that we'll get some guidance for then. But that's a real challenge with any of the health sciences. They're definitely human to human contact in all the labs.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a huge challenge for all of us. Josh, did you have a question?
Yes, hi. Thanks for everything you've done.
Sure.
There's a lot of, we talk about information asymmetry and sharing information, and I can just picture endless questions about what we're discussing today and 824. Is there a plan to set up a Project 824 website with like frequently asked questions? I was just Googling it, trying to find some information. For example, the scorecard that the provost mentioned could be put up there when it comes out, and things like that, just to keep everybody abreast of the same information.
I think that's a really good idea. I'll include that in my discussions with the provost office in the days ahead. The Matt Corden and I met with the provost on Friday. We have a monthly meeting, just the faculty senate chair and chair-elect with the provost, and she mentioned this Project 824 group, and I think she's trying to get me and Matt maybe both included in that. Probably in the fall, it'll probably just roll over to just being Matt, maybe Matt and the new chair-elect. But yeah, so I think they're trying to include us where they can. We have to keep pushing. I'm glad that was brought up in the meeting. Thanks, Lynn, to have more faculty representation in groups like that.
And I think just a central source of information would help to alleviate a ton of questions.
Right. I'll bring up the website ID. I think that's a good idea. Anything else about kind of what I've told you so far about the fall, Lynn? You're muted.
Yeah. Following up on Josh, I'm getting two different things from my faculty. Some faculty feel that they're being inundated with too much information. Some faculty are saying they're not getting enough information. So I want to confirm or affirm Josh's suggestion. If we set it up as passive, that they could go and read what they wanted to, that would solve sort of both of those problems.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so I might move on to another issue that has come up on the provost office meetings. You may recall that in the fall we discussed, I think twice, changes to the tenure policy, so that instead of doing annual tenure reviews, we would do reviews in years 2 and 4. So that's been adopted now. That should be a new part of our BUPP literature, I guess, that now it's going to be tenure reviews are only going to happen in years 2 and 4. And for people who I think, we have a tenure clock extension for everyone. So I understand that people in the provost's office are working with the dean's offices to figure out which year everyone is going to be on, and then when their next review needs to happen. Now, units, departments, and colleges can decide to continue doing years 1, 3, and 5 if they would like, but it isn't going to go through all the steps like it normally would or it used to do, where it would go all the way to the provost level, year 1 letters, year 2 letters, year 3 letters. Only years 2 and 4 are going to be evaluated. Any questions or comments on that?
Brian, any changes to the post-tenure associate to full agenda?
That policy has been circulated. We reviewed it in the fall while we were also reviewing the faculty dismissal policy changes. Mm-hmm. So you'll remember there were some changes to the faculty dismissal policy that we had issues with, and we went back and forth with Jim Benninghoff and some others in the provost's office to get those modified to more acceptable place. They're still not completely perfect, but I think we decided that we were okay with them the next time the Title IX policy gets revised, we probably want to revisit the faculty dismissal policy. So at the same time we were having those discussions, we were also looking at the new university guidelines on promotion to full professor. My understanding is we had I received no feedback from anyone on that policy. I read it. It looked reasonable to me. So they're moving forward with it. I don't think it's been fully adopted yet, but I suspect it will be maybe tomorrow. We have our next provost office meeting tomorrow, what used to be called the Council of Deans. So they vote on those policies and endorse them or not.
Brian, can I ask a quick question on that? Since we've been dealing with this in my department, in A&S, as you know, we've been revising our promotion to full professor policies at y'all's behest. And the document that we got in November doesn't really look at all like the document that has been passed out, has a new name on top of it, no longer called 702. Maybe I just don't understand the process, but how is it that what we said okay to has transformed into something else that doesn't really look like it? And when will we get word that yes, this actually is the official thing? Because it's all been linked, by the way. 702 doesn't exist on the website.
Right. So I think 702 is coming. I think 702 will exist. I think there's a chance in arts and sciences. I haven't been very involved in this, but I know Ken Wilkins and Kim Kellison and Lee Nort have worked on sending out. I've been involved with some of the drafts, but they're sending out a model for a departmental promotion policy. So there's a departmental policy. I think that might be what you're referring to, Kurt, and then the university policy, which is 702. So 702 governs things like a timeline. When do you have to let your chair know? And how many letters, external letters do you need to have? How does a review look? You know, kind of the university steps. Departmental policy, which your departmental policy governs, is what are the necessary qualities someone needs to have achieved? What are the necessary achievements someone should have accomplished to be a full professor of political science or mathematics? So what kind of research accolades, what kind of teaching, what kind of service do they need to do? So the departmental policy is a separate thing from 702. Does that sound reasonable?
It sounds reasonable. I'm just, I guess, surprised that what we said we thought was going to be 702 really does not look like 702. There's language in it. You can see where, you know, it's been moved around and there has been a beefing up, if you will, of the scheduling. But there are several elements in there that they're completely gone. Review policies have completely changed, and it's no longer titled 702.
Really?
And it has a new heading even. So I'm just wondering if we're going to get a new 702. What was sent out, is that 702? There seems to be some confusion on this, and I'm leery about putting together departmental standards, as you say, if we don't really know what the university guidelines are.
Right. No, I think that makes sense. So Kurt, if you wouldn't mind forwarding maybe me and Matt Corden what you got, and we'll compare it to what we looked at with 702 earlier, and if this is something that the Senate needs to address, then we certainly want to address it. Does that sound reasonable? Okay. Other issues? I think I've covered the high points of the provost office meetings that I've attended and the COVID-19 planning meetings. So I'll move along on the agenda. The next portion of the agenda is a report from Kathy Hurt from the nominating committee.
Thanks, Brian. We had a nominating committee. I think all of you received the email from Brian that lists all of us, and it was a very active and involved committee. Thanks to all of you who reached out and asked about your willingness to serve. In the end, our committee, the slate we're recommending is for Chair-elect Coretta Pittman, who's in the English Department, Arts and Science. For Secretary, Michael Long has agreed to continue on in that capacity. And for Publicity Officer, Denise Rogers has agreed to take over that role. So because we're coming from a committee, this serves as a motion for this slate of officers based on the recommendation of the nominating committee.
Thanks, Kathy. Maybe I'll ask Coretta, Michael, and Denise if you would leave the meeting And then I will email you as soon as we're done with this portion of the meeting. Is that okay? Thanks. Bye, Coretta. Bye, Michael. Bye, Denise. Okay. For this
I
portion.
second the motion.
Okay, thanks, Karen. For this portion, I'm also going to turn off our live stream. So all of you who've been watching us on live stream, thank you for coming. Feel free to reach out to me if you have questions that we didn't get a chance to answer, and we appreciate your help. We'll also turn off the recording for this part of the meeting.
I don't think that needs a second since it comes from the committee.
That's true.
Oh, sorry.
But it's still great to have it. Okay, let me see. How do I turn off the live stream?